now bring you from the 19th century into the 21st century. Sojourner Truth is being interviewed by a journalist.
Miss Truth.
Yeah?
My name is Jimmy Nolsen from the People's Voice. Do you mind if I ask you a few questions? I'm sure these people here would like to know a little bit more about you.
All right.
Okay. Miss Truth, is it true that you were born here in Ulster County?
Well, yes, Mr. Nolsen, it is. But I'm not used to the word Ms. You can call me Sojourner. That's just fine with me.
All right. And you can call me Jimmy. Can you tell us a little bit about your early life here in New York?
I was born Isabella Bone Free, and my parents were James and Betsy, the property of Colonel Hardenberg. His estate was in Swaterkill, part of Ulster County, back in 1797. You know, I didn't speak English as a child. I was brought up to speak Dutch. And by ear, I listened and picked up the English language because, you know, slaves were not allowed to read or write. Eventually, I was sold to John Dumont. He forced me to wed a fellow slave, Thomas, and from that union, we had 5 children.
You know, it's hard to believe that from that beginning, you became one of the most famous African-American women of the 19th century in America. And you traveled all over the country as an advocate for human rights for over 40 years. How did you leave your life as Isabella and become Sojourner Truth?
While I was doing some housework, Jimmy, for Ms. Whiting, while I was scrubbing the floor, God spoke to me just as plainly as you and I are speaking. And he said to me, go east. So I changed my name to Sojourner as I was to be his pilgrim. I told my owner, Master Dumont, that I was leaving. He asked me to stay until the harvest, and I agreed. But then Master Dumont went back on the agreement, and so one day I just decided to take my daughter, Sophia, and I walked to freedom. Over time, I was asked one day what my name was. I said, Sojourner. They said, Sojourner what? I had to think about that for a while because slaves were given the last names of their masters. So after a time, I said truth, because God is truth, and I am his instrument. And so I became Sojourner Truth, speaking the truth wherever I went.
But weren't you afraid of being recaptured or maybe even killed? Who helped you along the way?
There were many Quakers in the area who belonged to the Quaker faith, working against slavery.
Sojourner, I understand that you were one of the first African American women to win a court case in the United States. In fact, you won 3. Can you tell us maybe about the first case?
I see. Well, the time was after the Civil War. You see, before President Lincoln, there were 2 streetcars. One was for the whites, the other was for Jim Crow, for us colored. President Lincoln outlawed this, but the streetcars and their conductors only wanted whites to ride the streetcars. I worked at a hospital for former slaves in Washington, D.C., so I was party to the discrimination. Anyhow, I was with a girlfriend named Laura, white woman. We were tired of walking, coming from work. So we thought we would get on the streetcar. My friend did not want to get on the streetcar because she knew that I could not get on. So we had a plan. She would flag down the streetcar, she would get on, and then I would get on. She did. And we both got on. When I get on, the conductor said, "Get off. Get off. You don't belong here. Get off." And I said, "No." And so he came and grabbed me with such force that he took my arm out of the socket. And so I went to court, sued him, and won the case. And by the way, this was one of the many. But I won the case, and after that, all the streetcars looked like salt and pepper.
So, wow, you were a pioneer. You owned 2 or 3 homes, conducted business, and went on speaking engagements too when it was not, shall we say, popular for you to do so. You opened the way for former slaves to be just as free as whites.
That's right, and I'm going to tell you something else, Jimmy. Because this mind doesn't serve me well all the time. But I'd like to tell you about this courthouse in Kingston. I had a son named Peter. And Mr. Dumont took my son and sold him to a couple who escaped down to Alabama. It was against the law at that time for children to be transported across state lines. And so with the help of my friends, they told me about this courthouse, which is just as imposing as it was back then. And I stood outside. They fixed me up with a lawyer. And after 2 years, I got my son Peter back. That, I believe, for you folk, was the first.
You know, your life is so full of amazing and interesting stories. What would you say is your most memorable?
Jimmy, my most memorable was my visit to the White House to sit down and talk with President Lincoln. Any of y'all been to the White House? No, ma'am. I see people shaking their heads. Well, I went to the White House, and we had fancy china and nice cookies. And we talked a long time about what was happening to the Negroes. And I'm going to tell you, I was treated with the utmost kindness and cordiality, and I believe that he was a great and good man, and that hand that signed the death warrant of slavery signed my little book, and he wrote in it, "For Auntie Sojourner Truth, October 29th, 1864, Abe Lincoln."
Sojourner, nowadays we honor you with monuments, award programs, postage stamps, and in 1997 we even named a Mars Probelander after you. It's been an honor to meet you and in person and to be reminded of what you achieved those many years ago with all those honors. I sure hope we meet again.
Jimmy, you talking about things that are very strange to me. You said a what, rover?
A Mars Probelander.
A what?
A Mars Probe Land Rover.
And where was it?
Well, Mars.
Can anybody help me out here? Mars, the moon?
Mars, the red planet, Mars.
And there's statues and stamps and all of that?
You've got stamps, statues, yeah, all awards.
Glory be, glory be. So until we meet again, thank you so much.
Till we meet again.